Hello, friends, and welcome back to a Daily Devo with Dot, where we are talking about the peace of God and how the peace of God should be ruling and reigning in your hearts. According to Colossians 3:15, peace has the opportunity to reign and rule. The question is it? Today, I want us to talk about a topic that's a little harder and a little more challenging, but it's also something we need to be very honest about. So, I want to ask you some questions and I want you to be honest with yourself and to truly examine your heart today to see where you are standing in your relationship with God. So, the first question I want to ask you: have you ever been angry with God? Or are you angry with God right now? Now, we can all put on our little halos and pretend like we are perfect Christians who never question God. We never question His authority. We never question what He's doing in our lives. But if we could be honest, we would all admit there have been times that situations have come up in our lives and we didn't necessarily like what happened. Maybe there was a prayer that you were praying desperately for, and God didn't answer it the way you wanted Him to. And you found yourself hurt. You found yourself questioning God. You found yourself angry at God. And I'm going to say that every one of us, sometime in our life, have probably felt that. So today we're going to talk about being at peace with God. To truly understand the peace of God, we have to be at peace with Him. So whether you're upset with Him or whether you are angry at Him, maybe you're hurt, you're devastated, and you were just wondering where was God during all of the suffering. And so wherever you are in your life, maybe it's an issue that happened a long time ago and you just have chosen to ignore it. Whatever it is, what I want to say today is first to really have the relationship with God that He wants you to have, you have to be at peace with Him. Okay? There is no peace of God unless you're at peace with God. So being at peace with God today, I got to thinking about in my life, there have been things that have hurt and have really brought me to my knees and have left me questioning why God. There are two really huge instances that I can think of. One was when, and I know this sounds so silly now, but at the time when I was going through it, I was in my young 20s, early 20s, and I had been dating a guy on and off for several years, and the Lord just separated us. He just put an end to our relationship, and I could not understand why. I really thought this guy was the right one. On paper, we looked great. It sounded great. It made sense. He was going to be a preacher. We had known each other forever. We went to Bible college together. He preached. I played the piano. We sang together. I mean, we were really just this golden couple, but things just weren't right. And no matter how much we forced it, it just wasn't right. And so God eventually just broke the relationship up, and I was left devastated. I mean, just took me years to recover from that hurt and that rejection. And I just found myself asking God, why? Why would you ever even have let me enter that relationship? Why did you make me waste so much time in my life? Why wasn't I good enough for this guy? And just all these questions, all these whys and whys and whys. And of course, years later, I saw that it was because God had the man that He intended me to be with, the man who went above and beyond anything I could have ever dreamed of or even that I even knew I needed in my life. But I had to trust God with the process, that all those whys I couldn't see under at the time, but God was answering them slowly and slowly. But I just had to trust Him during that time. Another big why moment for me was after my husband and I had been married for several years, and through some just situations, found out that we were not going to be able to have children. And the first time the doctor told me that, I was actually in the hospital because of a car wreck. And I thought I had a broke leg, which I did, had a broke leg. And I had to go in for all the x-rays, and the doctor came in and didn't even come fully into my room, just stood right there at the door and said, okay, so you don't have a broke leg, but you do have tumors in your uterus. And then he just kind of stopped and looked at me for a little bit. And he said, do you have children? And I said, no, sir, I've only been married a few years. And he said, okay, well, I'm sorry to tell you, you will never have any children, but don't ask me any questions. Call your OBGYN and talk to her. And then he turned around and left me in a hospital room in shock, trying to process all this information. And that's how I got my news. And of course, I just was blown away. I have tumors. Like, what does that mean? Do I have cancer? I can't have children? What? you know? And long story short, we ended up going to several specialists. They all said the same thing, that having children would be impossible. And so that began a why journey. Why, God? Why am I not good enough to be a mom? Why do you trust me to teach, children's church, but you don't trust me to be a mother? All these whys just began to hit me and just overwhelm me. And I, in that moment, just was so broken. And then I was mad, and then there was the grief, and then the denial, and, all the different stages of that. But then it was in the, okay, God, I trust you. You have a plan. You put the desire of motherhood in my heart, and it may not look the way I thought it was supposed to. But if you want me to be a mom, God, then nothing can stop that from happening. And few years later, we were floored to find out I was pregnant. And let me just say this, that whys happen for a reason, and it's okay. It is okay to find yourself in a why moment and to question God and to ask Him why. I have heard many people say they do not believe that as a Christian you should ever ask God why. And I just want to say that I wished I could be strong enough as a Christian to never ask God why, to never be hurt, to never be broken, to never be confused in my life, to the point where I ask, God, I don't understand what you're doing. Why are you doing this to me? Why is this happening? I think, yes, we should get to that point. But my friend, we are human. And because we do not know God's ways, and because we do not understand God's ways, and because we can't see God's ways, our human flesh will question. Just like you, when you were a child, you question your parents sometimes. They didn't turn their back on you just because you questioned something. No, it gave them the opportunity to explain and to show their heart. Now, in our life, yes, I do believe we should have faith that God is working all things out for our good. But I do believe that God allows us to come to Him with our questions, with our concerns. Otherwise, why do we need Him? This is an opportunity for us to rely on Him and lean on Him in those times of hurt and in those times of suffering. So, don't think that you are a bad Christian because you ask God why. Now, I do truly believe it's what you choose to do with the why that makes all the difference in the world. Your why could be a why of desperation. But when your why becomes bitter and angry and resentful, then that just brings out a whole different outcome. The why of God, I don't understand what you're doing. God, I don't like what you're doing. God, this hurts. But God, I need you. I need you to help me during this time when I don't understand why. And friend, let me just say, just because you ask God why does not mean you're going to get the answer. You may never know why God chooses to do something. And honestly, even if you did know the answer, would it really truly help? So some of you may be disagreeing with me right now, saying, no, Dorothy, you should not be asking God ever why. And I've had people say that. And if that's what you believe, that is fine. But for me, I needed to know that it was okay that I said why, or I asked why from time to time. And so I went to the Word of God. And do you know what I discovered in the Word of God? That when Jesus, the perfect Son of God, who knew the Father better than any of us, knew the heart of the Father, knew the love of the Father, even Jesus, when he was dying on the cross, said those words, why? Why? Why, Father, hast thou forsaken me? Matthew 27:46 and Mark 15:34 are two accounts where we see Jesus saying, why? Why? But it was in that why that he also submitted to the Father's will. And that's the difference. Friend, we have to submit to the Father's will in the midst of the whys. Whys are hard. Whys bring up a lot of emotions. But it's right there in the midst of the hurt and in the emotions that we can lay all that at the foot of the cross. When I was thinking about this study this morning, I thought of the verse. This verse just came very heavy on my mind from Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30. What a powerful verse that just shows the love and the heart of the Father. It says, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That yoke that Jesus is talking about, if you've ever seen pictures or watched movies of old farmers, you would see where they would have the cow and they would put that big wooden, what was known as a yoke around the cow and join two cows together. And that would allow them to control the cows. It was kind of like a bridle for a horse's mouth, but it would go over around the ox, and that would allow them to control the ox to do what they needed it to do. And a lot of times it was used for gardening or different yard work. But he says, first, he says, come unto me. So that's the first thing you have to remember. Go to him. If you're mad at him, that might be hard for you to do. You may be wanting to ignore him. You may be wanting to run from him. But that's the worst thing you can do. In the midst of the hurt, you need to go to him. Listen, if your child is mad at you, you are not going to allow your child to run away or to ignore you or to slam their door and lock their bedroom door. No, you are going to force relationship with that child even when they're angry. Our Father is so good, but he doesn't force that relationship. He allows us to come to him on our terms. And unfortunately, what happens is our flesh gets involved and we don't want to go to him. Well, friend, just like a parent forces that relationship back to the child, You need to force yourself back to the Father, even if you don't feel like it. Force yourself back to Him. Because see, that is Satan at work right there. Satan cannot, absolutely cannot pull you away from the Father. So what he wants to do is distract you away. He wants to move your heart away from the Father's, because he knows if he can get you away from the Father's love, then he can completely move your heart away from God's, because God's heart is never going to move away from you. And the Bible tells us nothing can separate you from the love of God. But Satan's going to try, okay? He's going to do everything he can to pull you out of that relationship. So first we see in Matthew 11 that he says, come to me. So go to him. Go to him. All of you that are heavy laden, that are broken and hurt and tired and exhausted, go to him. And then he says, take my yoke upon you. Now, there's two different ways that you could look at this. You could look at it as you were going into partnership with Jesus and lining up with him to do the work. But I think in a case of brokenness and in a case of hurt, that it's more of you are going under the yoke. You are going where he is leading you and you're under his authority. Yes, he walks side by side with us, but in cases like this, when you are too weak, you are under him and he is helping you. So he says, take my yoke upon you. There is that beautiful thought there that you are submitting yourself to his authority. When you're taking that yoke upon you, you're submitting to the master. You're submitting to his way, even though you didn't like it. But then look what happens when you take that yoke upon you. You're beginning to learn of his way. You are learning his heart. For he says, I am meek and lowly in heart. Meek and lonely it's releasing that pride that when we don't get our way, sometimes our pride gets involved saying, you didn't deserve this. This isn't fair. If he loved you, he would have never allowed this to happen to you. And that pride gets involved. I didn't deserve this. I'm too good for this. And pride gets involved. And he says, look, I need you to learn to be meek and to be lowly. So looking at his heart and seeing his heart. But then he also says, and you will find rest. Listen, there is nothing more important than finding that rest. And I'm not talking about the rest from the sleep, but just that rest where your soul is at peace. Finding that peace. For your yoke is easy. The word of God says, for my yoke is easy, talking about Jesus. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Today, maybe you find yourself in desperate need of this weight being lifted off of you, whether you're mad at the Father and you just have been walking around with this heaviness, and he's saying, hey, why don't you come to me and let me release that burden from you? Let me help you. But in order to do that, in order to find that peace where you are at peace with God, you have got to surrender your will and your way to him. So those of you who know me know I have an 11-year-old. Y'all know that my story did not end there at the doctor's office. My story didn't end with tragedy and heartbreak. It didn't end there. It started there. That part of my story was there. And it was through a lot of prayer and a lot of just running to God over and over and over, where Lee and I chose we would not be bitter. We would not be angry. We would accept the will that God had for our life, trusting that He had a plan. And God gave us our son. And do you know our son ended up becoming known as the miracle baby? The hospital, the doctors, the specialists, they all called him the miracle baby and talked about the modern day miracle that we got to experience and that they witnessed because of our birth story. And it all happened without help. It all happened, it was just supernaturally. God gave us this miracle. And in your life, if you will allow God the time, if you will trust Him with your whys, if you will lay them down at the foot of the cross, God can take those why God moments and turn them into wow God moments. Did you hear that? God, and only God, has the power to change your why God moment into a wow God moment. God is incredible. And God is not finished with your story yet. Give that to Him. Give Him your why. Talk to Him. Get angry at Him. Yell at Him. Let Him know how you feel, because, sister, He already sees your heart. There's no reason not to be honest with Him. God can handle it. And once you've had your talk with God, then you say, okay, God, now I trust you with it. And I thank you for how you're going to perfect it in my life. Because remember, we learned that in Psalms. We learned that God says He will perfect the things that concern us. But we're knowing and we're trusting that the way He perfects it may not be the way we wanted Him to perfect it, but He's perfecting it the way He knows is best. So, friend, today, what is it that you need to trust God with? What is it? What is that why that is eating you alive and causing you so much heartache? Give it to God today. Give it to Him. Give Him time to perfect it. Keep trusting Him in the process. And I promise He will give you the opportunity to one day say, wow, God. Friends, if you have not spent time with the Lord today, will you go do that? Will you go spend time with the Father, who is a God of peace, who will give you peace, and who wants you to be at peace with Him? Love you, and joy and blessings.